You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.
And welcome to the Win-Win podcast. This is Ben Wolf, as always, your host. I am happy to have you join us on this official podcast of Wolf's Edge Integrators, which is wolfsedgeintegrators.com. And I'm super stoked to have joining us today our own Joanne Giordano, who is not only the integrator / number 2 leader / COO of Wolf's Edge Integrators internally, so the integrator of integrators, but is also one of the integrators who serves our clients and helps them run and scale their businesses to where they want it to go. So I'm very happy to have Joanne here to talk about the topic of 10xing process in your business. So 10xing process in your business. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you, Ben. It's great to be here.
I appreciate you making the time to have this conversation. And so that I know you've been on the podcast before, and we've done recordings before, but For those who don't know you, who are watching this or listening to this, can you please give us like a 2-minute background on yourself, kind of some context of how you got here, and particularly as it might apply to the topic of 10xing process like we're talking about today?
Yeah, great. So, I started my career, I think I've said this before, but in corporate America. And, I quickly got into operations and crisis management in particular. So I was sort of the go-to person when something would turn up, where it was an unsolvable problem, at least at first blush. And so and probably the biggest example of that was BP. And we were 10xing, day after day after day, because just the urgency of the situation, right? The actual disaster wasn't contained at the time we started. And it was really about getting folks paid and stabilized, because BP, as you might remember, had a little bit of a PR issue on their hands. And so it was really, just about how do you scale an operations very, very quickly. And so we'd have to look at our open capacity in offices. We'd run 3 shifts to deal with volume and things. So I definitely cut my teeth on 10xing in that environment. And it was just a ton of fun. And they were a great client to work for. And it was just sort of the start of this. And then, I moved from corporate to definitely a small business, a food and franchise company here in the Seattle area, just in Snohomish, Washington. And we too had to, we were kind of a industry in the assembly space where we had stores where you made these meals, being confronted with this Goliath of the Blue Aprons of the world and trying to figure out how to stay relevant and kind of shift in a way to be able to compete with folks that were like crazy amount of funding, right? And so, we really had to, and I think the key to 10xing, which is actually really good news, I think most people think, well, how am I going to work 10 times more? There's only so many hours in a day and I'm already tired. And that really is that 2x mentality. I can double down, I can really work hard, I can kill myself doing it. And sometimes, like, to start a business, that's really a necessary kind of path. And it's really, I think, what people gravitate towards because it just seems logical. But I remember reading the book 10xing and I was like, oh, I don't actually have to do that. I really can. It's about using your creativity and leveraging things like processes to put in, these kind of foundations where there might not be originally, and be able to leverage that with the team. So I think it's a combination for me of process and even using some of the softer tools like people motivation and leadership and helping people see that vision. But yeah, I'd love to talk about the process part.
Well, yeah, please, I definitely want to hear that from you. And I also, because you mentioned the importance of the human element of it, because, it's not like we can mechanically implement process into a business to be carried out by humans without including a consideration for the human factor and for influence that you were just speaking about. So I don't want you to not talk about that by any means.
Great.
I guess the first thing I would ask you, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right because, we can have all the best process in the world, but if people aren't bought in and people, I mean, I think generally people are a little apprehensive of change. It's not comfortable. We like to get in kind of a homeostasis. We want to be in that sweet spot, right? And really, in order to kind of break through barriers and 10x, we have to get comfortable with change. But it's also about reframing it. It's tying it to a mission. It's casting that vision and having everybody say that's where we want to go. And then it's all about, okay, then we're going to get through some of these things. We're going to maybe get a little uncomfortable for a while, but we focus on things like winning versus change for the sake of change, right? We have to have a really strong, solid why and get everybody kind of on the same page and excitement. Of course, that means you have the right people that are willing to go there with you, but it's a really foundational piece of making any changes. Yeah.
I know. I don't know if I want to. I'm sure you have other stories. I don't know if this is one of them that you were going to share today, but I think it would be good to start with an example or a story where people could
Sure.
see the power of it and how it works. I don't know if one of them you could talk about is I know one of your current clients, one of our current clients that
Yeah.
is starting off local and wants to go national
Yeah.
in a
Right.
in a regular small and mid-sized business, right? It's a good,
Yeah.
it's a nice business, very
Yes.
circumscribed, like a team in one place, and they want to go
Yeah.
national, right?
Yep.
So what's required to do that? I don't know if you could tell that story because you guys are in process of a roadmap towards that already, or
Yeah.
if you could share
Yeah.
a different story or both.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Yeah. And so that team is wonderful to work with. I came there and they have this foundation of people. And I have to say, one, their mission is so near and dear to my heart and theirs, right? And it is, I think a strong mission is oftentimes like the greatest springboard. There's a really good book called Grow by Jim Sengel that talks about missions being the catalyst of galvanizing the team and people. And in this client's case, they absolutely have that, and we all believe it deep in our hearts. And it really is what gets folks up out of bed in the morning. So that foundation was there. The heart, the culture, they live it, and that was lovely. I came in, I inherited that. That was already there, which was really, really cool. It's about keeping that as we grow too, right? Because that's one of the questions of always about 10xing is how do you keep what is precious and dear about your culture as you get bigger and bigger. But the team didn't have a lot of points of reference around kind of the process practices that businesses use in order to scale and grow. And so some of that's uncomfortable, but I do think, first of all, again, with the mission, I just heard this great quote. I think I told you the other day, no margin, no mission. So for me, that means
Mm.
we have to be really great stewards of our resources, human, financial, and even the time that we prioritize focused on certain activities that will really get us to those goals. Um, and that's how you kind of sell the change, right? It's like, listen, if we really want to do what we say we want to do, put a man on the moon or go national, right? And impact, in this case, as many kids as possible, then how do we do that, right? And so when you can get people to see and feel what that feels like, you can get that to become infectious. And so some of examples there are putting in things like I think EOS was probably the first sort of structural process change that we put in there. And when I first started, our to-dos, we were running in the red every week. And, I kept bringing it up and how do we get better at that? And so we implemented a calendaring process, very simple in process, but hard to do because really it's about consistency and doing committing and discipline to doing it. And so people didn't love it to start with. I've done this at other companies too, but it is something that really, again, simple, but the hard part is the change and sticking to it. But and working within people's different personalities. So some people take to discipline. You might tell them, they'll read it, they'll like, oh, great, I can do it. In fact, that's the example with one gal. She was like, Joanne, I want to talk about calendaring again. I've been doing this, this, and this, and like, what can I do to make it stronger? So we'll kind of work through that versus somebody, they have many folks that are just in the field as salespeople. So not just in the field, but they're all out in the field. So it makes much harder to do calendaring because I sit at my desk all day and my calendar is my driver. So it's just getting, working with those folks that's just not the driver to come up with some creative ways. And I, talk to, I have ADD also. So sometimes like I see it on my calendar and it's like, okay, if I can do it at that moment, that's the rule. You do it in that moment. But if something's distracting, my rule is I have to reschedule it and it has to be within that week. And that's kind of the way to make that accommodation for somebody who maybe is going to have a lot of fluctuation in their schedule or has like a, attention thing where it's sometimes harder to buckle down with it. And that has worked for other people. So it really is knowing your audience, knowing what motivates them, that is really strong. But then once you get that in place, and I could tell people were doing it, one, because our to-dos were not in the red anymore. And frankly, we've been really successful. And it's also that just really simple thing of doing what you say, right? But sometimes if you don't know how to get there, that's what process is for. And so just putting in something as simple as that has cleared up our to-dos, which means we're making traction. We're getting the things done that we say are the most important. So that's been a great success for this company.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to appreciate you talking about the human element of it
Yeah.
and the process when it comes to the individual on the individual level. Now, what approach did you take there to when it comes to like 10xing a process? Like, hey, how can we turn a business that
Yeah.
works a certain way at a certain
Yeah.
scale to something that
Yeah.
can work at 10x the scale, 20x the scale? We're going national, right? Maybe 30x
Yeah.
the scale. Like,
Yes.
how, tell me so that people can hear and see, like,
Yeah.
what approach did you take there? What was done or what is
Yeah.
being done, or sort of like what's on track to be done to
Yep.
to turn this into a business that has a process that can work at a much greater scale than what they were doing before to serve these kids.
Yeah, I think the most important is starting with the end in mind, right? It's having that 10-year goal of where we're going. And the visionary I work with here is wonderful. And he sees it. He sees it that far out. He knows exactly what he wants. And so then if you know where you're going, it helps you understand how to get there, right? And so one of the things that he recognized very early and that we really prioritized was, okay, let's figure out how to have technology do a lot of the lift because it's again back to that creativity and solving problems. It's not, you don't always have unlimited resources and cash where you can just hire the right people to get you there fast, right? Sometimes we have to be really creative in how we do it. And so we took an approach where building things in technology to do a lot of the lift gave us a greater arsenal or reach with the employees that we had. So, and a really good example of that is a great CRM system. So they happen to use HubSpot, and we have a lot of automations and journeys. And so it's really the platform in which the sales folks can make sure that we're tracking everything we know. We measure pipeline, all those things. But it also will send letters at different intervals, and we have our they use a different document signature process, but that all gets disseminated through the system. So it's not like people have to remember to do certain things, or we've got a system that is churning that stuff out. The other thing they did that was really great is they built and that is we are about to deploy that out to their ultimate partners and the people that work with them. And it's going to give us a great amount of data that we didn't have access to. It'll let us do things like one of the problems is, you have to overhire to have enough people in this world, in this space, especially. And it's very expensive to do that, right? Recruiting is expensive. And so how can we turn that on its ear a little bit and leverage technology? And so one of the things is if you have people, these folks place teachers, and if people don't show, and we don't have a way to sort of filter those out of the system, then, we're counting on this kind of staff that doesn't necessarily always show up and perform. And so the system is actually saying, okay, they didn't show up twice, and so now they're out of the roster, so they can't pick assignments up, things like that. And so just understanding that, also
And that
leveraging
was manual
tools.
before, that those kind of things were
Yes,
manual before.
all manual. Yes, exactly. And then just having to clean up data and re-clean up data and do like pivot tables against like payroll data to see like who's working and how often. And that stuff it not only is it manual, it's very difficult. And the fact anytime you do anything manual, you're subject to human error. And so I think that was a piece where we knew we could really again, put the weight and the heavy lift on your technology and start with that. The other thing that we were just talking about is like is sort of a standard process, right, followed by all. And there's some really great systems out there. And I remember when I put an LMS system, like a classic LMS system used by universities, at one of the companies that I
What's an
was
LMS
with.
system for those who don't
Yeah,
know?
so it's a learning management system. And it's a way to train your teams to get consistency in process. But they were extremely expensive when I started out, both just the cost of the program, the implementation, the connectivity with our data and our point of sale system in that case. But today we have these great systems like Playbook Builders and Whale and Trainual. This client actually uses Trainual, but to store that stuff, I mean, and when I tell you it's at about a hundredth of the price that I was paying before, it's like some of these tools have become and so much more robust, and the ability to do things where you just have a one-stop shop where everything is there. We can make changes to process and everybody can be notified. So there's some really great
We
tools out
live
there.
in we live in such a miraculous time, right?
It's
A
unreal. It's
business owner, a
unreal.
small business owner has access to so much more. Like you just said, these ERPs and LMS systems that we can use now, you can get for like 10, 20,
CRMs.
$30 a month per
Yep.
user,
Yep.
cost, like you said,
Yes.
100 times more before.
Yes.
You simply did
Yep.
not have access to this sort of thing 20 years ago. Like, we live in a remarkable time.
And you would think it would be the opposite, because usually just, things just continue to get more and more expensive. But no, it's really, those are 10xer companies, right? That figure out how to really give so much value at a price where, they're working on a volume model instead of only the few can get into it. So yeah, it's really pretty cool.
Right, because they make platform softwares, right? So
That's
like
right.
lots of
That's
people
right.
can use the same system. You could certify individuals who could customize it for you or help you customize it.
Yep.
So all they have
Yep.
to do is just make one product and sell the software. Like, so
That's
they get a
right.
great
It's
multiple
brilliant.
and they do well. And it
Yeah.
just democratizes the ability to scale and build businesses so far beyond where it used to be.
Yeah. I just think, yeah, that it's a really great example of just leveraging technology, because AI too. You and I were just having a conversation about that too, and just like, gosh, can you imagine like writing job descriptions from scratch? Like we just don't have to do that anymore. We can get a really great basis, and we're editing and adding our touches, but you're talking about something that might have taken you 2 hours or so, right? For something that's a unique or new job, and now it's already prepared for you, and it might be a 15-minute exercise to make sure you're adding your specifics. So it really is an incredible time. And if our clients know how to use the tools or what tools to use, and I think we've got a really healthy understanding of what's out there, and have clients using it so that they can leverage and access things um, that we've used dozens of times now, right? So yeah, that's really helpful too, and it doesn't come at a hefty price tag, which of course for companies looking to scale, they're at the end where they need to get there, and they don't always have all the money in the world to do those things. So it's super fun to have access to tools.
So speaking of those tools,
Yeah.
how can people figure out, like, they want a 10x process in their
Yep.
business? How do they figure out what tools? Because there's so much out there nowadays, as you said.
Yeah.
How do you figure out what are the right tools? What tools are right for you? Like
Yeah.
how do you select which tools? Because most tools also will require some customization and some training. So
Yeah.
like how do you
Yeah.
select the right tools so that you don't waste your time and energy on something that's not a good fit for you, or it's not very good,
Hmm.
or whatever? Because there's
Yeah.
also low quality products out there as well. So
Sure.
um,
Yes. Yep.
how do people select what tools they should be bringing to the table to 10x their process in their business?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like an operating system, right? Is like your first basic tool, right? You've got to have everybody on the same page and same expectations about how we measure, how we track our responsibilities,
What do
all
you
of
mean
those things.
operating system?
So, I mean, like a business operating system, and EOS is a really great one that we work with a lot of our clients on. And so then the first tool I would recommend there is 90, right? It's a repository of everything that we need to measure in one place. And so everyone gets used to storing their to-dos there. It's where we have our meetings. It's where we have our individual meetings, and everything's in the same place. Our scorecard. So, like, what are the metrics we need to do to get to that goal? And we start to formalize those. And it's just a way for us to have that constant connection. 90 is another tool that, and there are others out there, but that is not a very high cost. But it's a really great value because it keeps us all on the same page. So if a company that I'm working with doesn't have something like that, or even take 2 steps back and doesn't have a business operating system, we would recommend that first, right? And then, it really also depends on the business and what they're doing. So if you're a direct consumer business, you're not a CRM is it's helpful. And there are other applications, but in a B2B, it's really almost essential. And so you're prioritizing those things. And then, you're saying, okay, does this company have strong process? They might have strong processes, but is everybody following it? Is it just sitting in a manual? Because that's not really easily consumable. And so I think a lot to just the pace of the world. I really recommend using one of those systems like Playbook Builders or Whale so that we can make videos, because it also is true that not everybody learns the same way. And so we have the opportunity to have like written processes and then video content. And just leveraging all of these wonderful tools in those kind of systems. And so I guess it's really taking a step back, knowing your 10-year goal, end in mind. Okay, how do we get there? What do we have? Assess that, and then kind of do a true up. And then we're looking also, because resources, you've got to make decisions. So what's going to help us leapfrog and be the most influential, the highest and best use of our time, our money, our technology. And we're always asking ourselves that question. I ask myself that question, even just doing a task. Is this, at this moment, is this the highest and best use to get me where we're going? And it's just a great reminder that we just always have to be laser focused on those goals. So it is dependent on kind of the needs of the business, the resources we have available. But as we just said, some of these tools are so inexpensive that we're able to bring on a lot that can do that heavy lifting for us, that really does help us get there faster. But sometimes that's a culture shift, right? We were talking about change and change being hard. And so, you don't want to do too many things at once, because you need people's buy-in. We need them, to adopt the technology. The other good thing about the new technology, generally speaking, I would say about these tools that we're talking about, is they're relatively intuitive. So even though I have clients that are like, oh, I don't want to put another system on my team, it's a lot already, they don't love technology. And sometimes I just have to say, you're going to have to trust me on this, that it really is, once we get it in, I think you'll see that it's not really is fairly intuitive and easy to use. But I think where technology falls down, it's not the technology's fault, is just like having a plan for adoption and making sure
Mm,
people are comfortable, giving them the right training to
mm,
execute it well, giving them the time and space for that training, right? Not just throw it over the fence and say, here's your training manual, so go figure it out. No, it's really like formalizing it, making sure, measuring that we're actually all doing the things that we learned to do. So
right,
those are really important pieces too.
right. I know I'm thinking of one of our recent clients started a month or two ago with April Sterkula from our team. Started working with a law firm that had implemented a new practice management software, and it was a
Yes.
complete disaster. And how they had, oh, we started paying for this practice management software, and like every day, the next day, let's everybody start using it. And it just, like, people just went around it. They didn't use it. It was like
Yeah.
no plan around either customization or around adoption and training that you were just speaking about. So just
Yeah.
sharing that story just to say that,
Yeah.
so now one of the elements once we came in there is to, okay, let's do this right this time, with whether it
Yeah.
was that system or a different system, but let's do it right this time. Doesn't have to be that
Yeah.
way. It's not because you're using a practice management system. That's not the problem. The problem is the way it
Yeah.
was rolled out.
Yep.
And people
It's
who are
true.
short on time, have never done it before, don't have enough time, they're already underwater. So, just didn't do it right. So, anyway, bring in someone, obviously, we're doing a lot of things as integrator or COO, but one of them is like, hey, we've done lots of technology implementations before. We know what
Yep.
that looks like. We know how to do that well and how to go slow to go fast, as you said earlier.
100%. Yeah, no, that is so true. And really, like the why, what is going to make, really trying to find those pieces so that people can connect to, okay, this is going to be some upfront pain because change is hard and learning new things. And like you said, people get really busy and they're feeling like they're underwater already. So how could I do one more thing? And so it's kind of like, okay, so what will we be able to do with this? How does it benefit the company? Certainly, how does it benefit the mission? But that's what matters to people like us, right? And so it's like, what is it going to do for me? Like I remember going from a file system and paper and all these things going to a paperless environment, and boy, that was really painful for people because they were so used to, like, they kind of mentally knew where things were on their desk and those kinds of things, and it was like, so how do I articulate to folks, like, what are the changes that they're going to see, and cast that vision so that the pain is kind of worth it, right? um where it's just like anything else, that if we have to put in an upfront investment, it's going to be difficult in the beginning, but here are the 5 things that are really going to be huge benefits to us once we're done. We'll be able to search, right? You can't search paper on your desk. We'll be able to get things out automatically. We aren't going to have to like open up Word and type a letter and then send it out, and so, casting those things that, like, okay, when you start adding up and showing them that vision that, that letter might take you 10 minutes and this might take you, and you can't search your desk, and boy, you're going crazy trying to figure out where that settlement letter is or something, it's going to be all organized in a way where you'll have access to it so that you can kind of cast
Right.
that like hope that, yeah, it's going to start to save me time and make my life a lot easier because, and then it's worth it to go through that change.
Awesome. Yeah, there's just so many things come up for me with what you're sharing, but I want to add one last question because we're almost out of
Yeah.
time, which is, you were speaking before about the difference between 2x thinking of just like work
Yeah.
harder for incremental benefit versus 10x thinking when it comes to process. What would you share if someone wants to approach the idea of scaling or process the right
Yep.
way, in a 10x way as opposed to a 2x way? What what do people need to know to know how to do that difference?
Yeah, one is that 2x is not sustainable and certainly won't get you to 10x. I think that, and for most people, that's probably the biggest relief of information you can share with them because, they're already probably burnt out because they've been trying that 2x model, and that really it is this exercise in creativity. It's like, where do I want to go? And knowing that just working harder won't get me there. um and it's kind of mapping out that vision of and setting in this order of operations, but it really does start with creativity. Like, how are we going to get there, right? Is it a new model? Is it a new channel? How do we think about doing one to many instead of trying to earn, a one-to-one business model, right? Like omni channels. How can we diversify what it is that we're doing but still stay within the core of what we do, to look at synergistic partnerships, right? So it's really starting to move that, your right brain versus your left brain. Almost like, I think of 2xing in some ways more like that just charging forward, trying to be, just doubling down on your efforts. But really, I think it's that creativity and looking at, opportunity where, and giving yourself time to really step back and do that, whether it's an offsite as a leadership team, with that vision in mind, and start storyboarding, whiteboarding, trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? Or it's your individuals, not just your leadership team, but even, as your team gets more skilled, like leverage the people that are the front end of your business, right? The people that are touching your customers most intimately and closely, and ask what they're seeing. It's always amazing to me, like, sometimes we feel like we really understand a problem or how to fix it. But if we're not really involving our team and what are they seeing on the front lines, those might be really great nuggets to incorporate into our overall plan about what we need to do and change. And so it really is about harnessing our people. It's about and that creative process is what I would say. And so leveraging technology, but if we know what our beacon is, we know what our North Star is, then it becomes really clear about, what do we need to do to get there, right? And like I said, sometimes, cash is not, you're not, it's not unlimited, certainly, and resources aren't. And so how do we work? I guess the phrase is harder, not smarter, or smarter, not harder, right? Because it's, you have to leverage that creativity. You have to leverage, like, just new thoughts, sometimes breaking the mold, right? The whole disruption kind of wave that happened a few years back was, people turning something on its head and saying, and even these tools, like you're saying, the software model, right? Things like that are how we break through some of the traditional barriers, and really having that open mindset and empowering people to think. And even, that, it's okay to be wrong, because in order to be creative, we have to try stuff. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But if you don't try things, you're definitely not going to make those 10x leaps forward.
Right. That's so true. And, and one principle I'm hearing from you is it's important that you're going to be set in the right direction or the wrong direction, depending on if you're asking the right questions. If you're asking the questions of, how can we grow 10%? You're going to get one answer. And because, or you're going to get, maybe many possible ways that you could make a slight difference. Whereas if you say, how can I 10x, how can I go from 1 million to 10 million? How can I go from 10 million to 100 million? There's going to be much fewer options that are going to get that kind of massive improvement.
That's a good, yeah.
So it's a question of what question you're asking, whether you're going to get to the harder option or you're going to get to the smarter option, so to speak, the smarter, not harder dichotomy.
It also, it forces you to go to the smarter option, because harder, we know, is limited.
Because it's impossible. You can't.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
you can't.
You just work twice as hard. You can't get 10 times the results. Like, it's just not going to be possible.
No,
besides being miserable.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and burnout.
So true. Thank you very much, Joanne, for sharing.
Thanks, Ben.
The elements, both in terms of process, in terms of technology, in terms of the human element and influence and purpose. I really, really appreciate you sharing this about how people can get 10x in their process, not just 2x.
Yeah. It's a lot more fun to do it that way too.
Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
exciting. It's motivating.
Yeah.
100%. Thank you very much, Joanne, and everybody else. Thank you. I appreciate it. And everybody else.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's great. It's absolutely great. I think it's that it's that energy that gets created with that process that's so much fun, and people get really caught up in it when they realize that you're moving mountains. It's kind of neat.
Yeah, it's more exciting to move mountains than pebbles. And even just this conversation, it just gets me more excited and motivated just hearing and talking about it.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely one of the greatest concepts out there, I think.
Awesome. And I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing this. I hope everyone, and I know, got a lot of value from it. People can learn more about Joanne from the rest of the team as well, wolfsedgeintegrators.com. And everybody else, we'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.